What's up? How y'all doing? It's Jared. This is a CRKT Provoke. This is a sick little knife, but honestly speaking, if I'm going to stab myself in the leg with any knife, it's probably going to wind up being this thing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Right, so I didn't like this pocket clip at first, the actual just overall design of it. I liked how it operated, but I wasn't actually the biggest fan of the way that it looked actually in my pocket. That's changed recently. It's kind of grown on me. But what I'm talking about stabbing myself, right, is if I pull this thing out if I pull it back, right, and actually pull it out of my pocket, you can see it engages this corner of my pocket here just like a wave feature on this thing, and comes out of my pocket opened up. So you can imagine if I'm turning this thing in either direction, if I turn it this way a little bit, it's going to rip a hole in my pocket. If I turn it this way a little bit, it's going to rip a hole in my pocket and also in my leg. So it's cool, but at the same time, it's dangerous as hell. I gotta pull this thing forward and orient it forward to actually get it out of my pocket and deploy this thing properly. So it's a cool thing, it is, but honestly, this knife is dangerous as hell. I'm seriously a little bit worried about stabbing myself with this thing. As well, you can see I carry a whole bunch of crap in my pocket, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff always in my pocket. And I'm worried, honestly, for the knife itself, because if I pull this thing out of my pocket, that blade comes popping out. You can see I'm carrying a titanium Benchmade pen right now, and if that thing slams into the edge of that pen, I'm going to wind up dulling this tip out, dulling the blade out, because I'm scraping it on my pen every time I take it out of my pocket. So it's got some positives and some negatives. I really like this thing, but let me get a bit further back into it. Now, that's really not to say that I don't actually like this design. This is a freaking sick-ass knife. I love the mechanics of it, the fact that it's extremely individual. There's not basically anything that operates like this on the market. And you can actually open this thing one-handed, very fast, in a reverse grip, right? Which is something you can't say for most Karambit designs, right? Karambits with this wave feature. Because if I pull this thing out of my pocket and it doesn't deploy, I fail to actually engage that wave and hook it out of my pocket. Now, how do I open this thing, right? Like, you stick your hand up here like this and you kind of get it up and you hold it, and then maybe if I can actually deploy the blade like that, that's not reliable, especially in a high stress situation. If there's any sort of you're needing to cut somebody or something with this thing and I'm stabbing myself on the tip here. Come on, let me yeah, it is possible, but it's not easy, right? It's not actually a practical way of opening that thing. That's not the case with this design. I freaking love that, right? As well as the overall ergonomics of this thing, because you look at it and it doesn't seem like it's going to be comfortable in hand. It really doesn't. It seems like it's going to be relatively uncomfortable to hold. It's all square and there's all these strange lumps everywhere, but all of these lumps have actually been oriented properly to fit a human hand. You can see my fingers fall right into those finger grooves up there. That little bit of dip fits right into the center of my palm, and so it actually is a very secure, very comfortable grip, right? It is actually a comfortable grip. You can, especially for any sort of penetrating motion, any sort of slash cut you're going to be doing with this thing. Obviously, it's a karambit, it's a fighting knife. And so it's excellently designed as far as ergonomics and functionality, because it does have that one-handed opening feature. It's not all around positive. I wouldn't ever recommend anybody actually trying to get the function down to wave this thing out of your pocket. Can actually open it up. You don't have to actually flick that wrist. You can see if I give it a little bit of a downward thrust and forward at the same time, it comes out. You can open it like that. You can open this thing several ways, which is freaking cool, right? I got the one with the serrated blade here. Yeah, I actually got the one with the serrated blade because, again, this is a tactical knife, right? This is a fighting knife. It's a dirty work knife. And because of that, they call it a first responder's knife. Yeah, right? That's the reason I actually like the serrated edge here, the serrated model, and it gives a little bit of more aggressiveness to the actual overall shape of the blade, overall look of the knife itself. And in the karambit, with the intended use of this thing, those VEF serrations on there are going to do an excellent job. It is going to snag material, it's going to cut through material extremely well, and so it's a cool knife, but it's definitely not without its flaws, as well as longevity. I do question the overall longevity on this locking mechanism here. Yeah, there we go. Is 'cause if you're actually familiar with the way that this thing works, there's a little shelf right there. You can see it in there, that little shelf that's moving back and forth. And that is actually what this locking bar engages in. So the locking bar comes in, snaps into place, actually locks this mechanism up. But it's solid, right? If you're comparing this thing to something like a liner lock, that's a full engagement. It's got 100% engagement. And right now, it's rock solid. There's absolutely no motion in this thing. But if I use this thing for several years, I beat the crap out of it. I'm slamming it into stuff. If God forbid I actually have to cut somebody with this thing, how long is that going to last? How long is it going to be before you start to get a little bit of wobble and a little bit of overall play in this design? Time will tell. There's actually no way to tell. This isn't the first one of these knives that I've had. This is actually the third Provoke that I've had in my collection. You know what I mean? The first one I gave away. Second one I actually lost somewhere on the trail. Came out of my pocket, which is a negative for this pocket clip because it doesn't have the greatest retention, but at the same time, it is freaking cool, right? It does work. You can see the way that it works there. It just pops up, flicks in and out of your pocket. Most people who are watching this video are probably very familiar with this knife. This isn't a new design. It's been on the market for several years, and it hit the market like a freaking bomb. When CRKT came out with this thing, they kind of reintroduced themselves, honestly. CRKT, for me, in my brain, was a hard-use, fixed-blade axes. Big knives, right? Big woods knives, big machetes, things like that. That's really where my brain would go when I would think of the name CRKT, right? Columbia River Knife and Tool. That is really where my brain would go, and it's not anymore. This thing has reprogrammed my brain, as well as I think it's actually reprogrammed the market towards what you think of CRKT. This is the first thing that people think of when they hear CRKT a lot of the times, and that's it's remarkable. Honestly, it is. It's remarkable in the fact that they did make this design, right? Because the designer right there, you can see Caswell Knives, the actual designer of this thing. I don't know, but I would imagine he probably might have taken this design to a couple different companies before it was actually accepted by anyone. And all of those companies, if anybody did actually turn this thing down, are kicking themselves now, because these things freaking sell like crazy. It's not an expensive knife. It's got an MSRP of $225. You can find it anywhere between like $200 and $150, depending on where you go on the market. And it's legal to carry, right? And it's legal to carry in a lot of areas because it's got a 2.4-inch blade length. And for having a 2.4-inch blade length, this is a sickeningly deadly knife for 2.4 inches, right? There isn't a whole lot of things out there besides a Karambit that can have the length of blade that this thing does. They can have with the same capability in defensive and offensive tactics that this thing can actually deliver, right? There isn't a whole lot of them out there. You most look at a 2-inch bladed folding knife, right? It doesn't have the same capability that this thing does. And so with that, I have a lot of respect for the overall Karambit design because of that. That's not just this knife. You can actually attribute that to basically any Karambit on the market. But this thing it fills that gap, right? It enables you to open it with one hand. It's a manual action folder. Microtech has made a couple with, a push button automatic. They actually have the button at the back, the Karambit, button at the back, and so it'll deploy it with an automatic knife. But that's still an automatic knife, right? And it's a blade length over 2 inches. It's not legal to carry in California. This thing, manual action folder with a blade length less than 3 inches. This is actually fully legal to carry in the state of California. California having some of the strictest knife laws in the country, not the strictest, but some of the strictest knife laws in the country. And so, yeah, the fact that this thing is actually legal to carry around, has the capabilities, and overall just cool factor in design, the mechanics, it's an excellent freaking knife, and I freaking love it. I really do. I like this thing. The blade is bolted on. Look at that. The blade is actually bolted onto this mechanism, so it rocks back and forth. Look at that. I freaking love this thing, right? It's just so much fun to play with. Opposite the fact that it's actually just as deadly as it is, and it is such a dedicated fighting knife. It's actually fun. You can show this thing to people, and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool." They want to see it. They want to know how it operates. They want to play with it. I wouldn't recommend actually handing this thing to too many people who aren't necessarily experienced with knives, recognize how dangerous these things can actually be. But it's just so It's freaking cool. That's really just everything that I come down to is it's freaking cool. I like the fact that it has that chisel ground blade on both sides, which is actually functional because you can see it's almost like it's got its own little sheath, which is requiring for that chisel ground blade. Because if it actually had a traditional grind, it was ground on both sides, you would be hanging off, it'd be catching stuff in my pocket. I've never actually had anything catch in there. You can see the tolerances there. There is a little bit of a gap, but I'm not worried about my keys getting in there. I'm not worried about it actually getting beat up and dulling that blade out, opposed to actually when I pull this thing out of my pocket, maybe smacking into my pen or smacking into my leg. That's a serious negative with this thing, but that just takes a little bit of getting used to and actually deploying this thing, pulling it out of your pocket. So CRKT Provoke. It's a stupid name because what's it trying to provoke? Right? Besides maybe reorienting the thought of what people think of when they think of CRKT, because it definitely did that one for me. That's it. Y'all have a good one.